It's the weekend before Memorial Day. You walk into Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, and there it is. Pallets of Kingsford stacked to the ceiling. 2-for-1 signs, lump charcoal in the next aisle, natural briquettes, one bag over. And somewhere on a bottom shelf, if your store even carries it, a bag of coconut charcoal you've probably never tried. Here's the lie: the people stacking those pallets don't know what's in those bags. The price tag isn't telling you what matters. The marketing isn't either. Today, we cut through it. What you're actually buying, what you're actually burning, what's worth grabbing at one of these Memorial Day sales, and what to leave on the shelf. I'm Kenyatta Robinson. This is the Backyard SmokeMaster BBQ Podcast, and this is episode 108, The Charcoal Lie. Welcome, everyone, to the show. If you're tuning in live, as I say every week, your live comments are the true engine that drives this show. So please don't hesitate to jump into the comments. Anything barbecue related or tonight's topic, whatever is burning on your mind is fair game. So don't hesitate, jump in there. If I don't have an answer, there's usually somebody who is also in the comments that can provide some good information. That's what we're all about, supporting each other so that we can become better backyard pitmasters. So this conversation has been bubbling inside of the Backyard SmokeMaster Society. Coconut briquettes, natural alternatives, what's actually worth the money. Tonight's episode is the deep dive. By the end, you'll have a real Memorial Day buying framework, not just brand recommendations, but a way to think about charcoal that holds up, regardless of what's on sale over the Memorial Day holiday or at any time during the year. I've covered best charcoal and best lump charcoal on YouTube before. The links to those videos are in the show notes. This episode is the next level conversation those buying guides don't go into. So we're going to get into that today. But as I always love to do before we get started, I love to shout out the folks who are tuning in live, already active in the comments. Good evening to Kettle Mania. Good to see you as always. He says it's going to be a great show. We also have another society member. We've got Mike Sue joining us. He says hi. And then we've also got correctional officer for lockdown, as folks are out here racing about getting into the comments first. I always appreciate the enthusiasm. And then we've also got society brother Jeff. Jeff says, good evening to everyone. Good to see you guys. And then we've also got Mama Mika. Now, I've been kind of in my head. Mama Mika's interesting. I've been trying to figure out, is it Mama Mika or is it Mama Micah? Every time I say it, I start wondering, am I saying am I getting that wrong? Am getting it right? Somehow, if you can let me know in the comments which way is the right way. I want to make sure I get that right. Okay. Let's see. Kettlemania says, I'm super curious about the coconut and anxious to learn what to avoid. We've got, we're going to get into that. We've also got society member The Smiling Family says, "Hey all, good to see you all. Definitely appreciate you. Also, if you are tuning in live, feel free to take a moment to fill out or take the poll that we've got going on YouTube. What's your go-to charcoal? You've got 4 choices for the answers. You've got lump, standard briquettes, and what I mean by that is, Kingsford style. You've got natural hardwood briquettes or coconut briquettes, which seem to be, kind of emerging more and maybe gaining a little bit more traction than ever before. So next we're going to get into it, but before I do, I also gotta say hello to Carlton's Cooking. Good to see you. He says, good evening, everyone. And Carlton has a great YouTube channel as well. I know he does some videos on the smoke slinger, so make sure you check out Carlton's Cooking. And then, okay, thank you. So it's Micah. All right, I'm going to try and remember that. I'm glad that I asked. Something was telling me that I wasn't saying it right, and I've been saying it wrong for weeks. You can go back many episodes where I've been saying it wrong, but she says it is Micah, but I never fuss about it. Happy to be in the gang. Well, thank you, Micah, Mama Micah, for correcting me on that. And let's see. Kettlemania with the question. Not seeing everyone, Kenyatta has welcomed. Is the show running in parallel again? So yes, actually, thank you again for that. Kind of like a technical issue. The show will always be run in parallel on YouTube. In other words, there's going to be 2 versions. And this is also true on LinkedIn. We're also streaming live on LinkedIn. I have the ability now to live stream the show 2 different versions simultaneously. There's the horizontal version, kind of the traditional, looks like a television, like what you would see on your TV, 16:9 orientation. So we've got that version. That's the version that kind of gives you the fullest experience. Like if I share the screen or if I show some pictures, you'll see all of that stuff. Then we've also got the vertical version for those folks who are watching maybe on their phone and they're just used to holding their phone up like this. If you're holding your phone like this and you're watching it, then the show is oriented to best suit that type of an experience. So those are the 2 options. If you're on one but prefer the other, just back out onto YouTube, put in a search Backyard SmokeMaster BBQ, and you should see the other version available. So make sure you got the version you want. We've got M. Black's Test Prep says he's here to party. Absolutely. And he's trying to cause some trouble in the comments about Micah, the pronunciation of her name. I'm going to take her name for it. Thank you to the Train Man 64. Wow, he says he took the day off just to watch the live. Well, I definitely appreciate that, and I hope I can live up to that billing. I hope you have something else exciting going on today, but glad to have you live as well. And then we've also got Frank Meister, who says hello to everyone. And then we've already got a question from correctional officer. Says, is there a smell for charcoal? My smell is always a challenge when I am cooking. My wife tells me my cooks are with a strong and pleasant smell throughout the neighborhood. Ooh, that's a good question. And we're going to actually touch on this a little bit. It kind of depends on what type of charcoal you are using, whether or not you're going to get that scent from it. For instance, if you are using uh, briquettes, like match light briquettes, and they're, infused or doused, or I don't even know what the process is, but somehow they incorporate um, lighter fluid into the charcoal. You're gonna smell that. Personally, I think there is a scent to standard briquettes. It probably has something to do with some of the ingredients that are used to make the briquettes, but I do think that they have a typical smell. Lump charcoal should be made, or natural briquettes, they should be hardwood. So if there is a scent, it should mirror whatever type of wood is used to make, or to make the lump or the natural briquettes, whatever that ingredient is. So it kind of depends, is my answer to that. And we've got another question, hot question coming in from M. Black's Test Prep. What kind of mustard do we recommend for barbecue ribs? Any specific brand? I just use regular Heinz yellow, but I'm open to other recommendations. Ooh, so okay, my first reaction, and you all jump in the comments and comment on this as well. I don't think that any one yellow mustard is going to be any better for ribs than another. I think standard generic yellow mustard is going to be just as good as, Heinz yellow mustard or anything else that's considered to be a high end or, premium. I don't think it really makes a difference. Really, the main purpose of using the mustard with ribs is, just to give something for the rub to adhere to stick to. So it doesn't even have to be mustard. It could be as simple as water. Anything, that will just give something for that rub to hold on to while it's on the smoker. So that's my answer. You guys jump in if you have a different opinion. Jeff says, I think he's agreeing with me. He says, just plain yellow mustard. No need for anything fancy because the long cook time mellows it so you don't taste it at all. That is absolutely, I think, 100% true. By the end of the cook, you will not taste whatever you choose, whether it's mustard, anything else. It's really not going to come out in the flavor of the ribs. And then Carlton's Cooking says, I think there is a distinct smell to regular briquettes. Yeah, I do too. I think, like I said, I don't know if it's the binding agent or some other ingredient that's in there, but I do think the standard briquettes do indeed have some type of a scent to it. So I agree with that. All right, so let's jump in. Let's start breaking all of this down. So for our first segment, what we're talking about for Memorial Day, the overarching theme to this segment is don't buy on autopilot. So don't get too wooed in by the big sales that will inevitably be available at the big box stores for Memorial Day. It typically, at least to the stores, represents the official kickoff to the barbecue season in American retail. So, hardware store and big box charcoal sales at this time at the Memorial, they're typically going to be the biggest sales of the year, and they're very intentional to move volume and they're not trying to necessarily match the fuel to the cook. They just want to move as many of those charcoal bags as they can. Most cooks grab whatever is cheapest or the biggest bag or the most familiar logo. So that decision, if you end up buying, let's say 10 bags of Royal Oak or Kingsford or whatever, that decision then ends up kind of locking you in for the entire season, because you're going to feel like, ooh, I've already got all this whatever brand. This is what I should be using. I got a great deal on it. And we're going to, as we go through this, you're going to see that that may not necessarily be the charcoal that you want to be using, depending on what you're cooking on and what you are cooking. The real lie isn't that any one charcoal is bad. It's that the choice gets framed typically at the stores as lump versus briquette, when there are actually 4 real categories, and the right answer depends on your cooker and your cook. And we're going to try and break that down. All right. I see that comments are always active, so we're going to keep that train going. Love the comments. Correctional officer says his wife chimed in on the mustard issue. Well, what did she say? You didn't say how did she weigh in? You're leaving this hanging. So I want to know where your wife is on the mustard issue. But he also says, happy National Barbecue Month. Indeed. Okay, Mike says he is not seeing all the comments. Okay, so Mike, that tells me, so one, comments can be coming, and actually, I just realized this. Thank you. I can see that I can actually tell now whether your comment is coming in from the vertical feed or the horizontal feed on YouTube. For instance, I can see, Mike, that you, as well as correctional officer, you guys are watching this podcast in the vertical view. So in other words, it's optimized when you have your phone like this, right? So that's the view that you guys have. While some other folks, I see like Mama Micah, Jeff, I see you guys are watching on the horizontal feed based on your comments that are coming in. So your show, if you're watching on your phone, is optimized when you're holding your phone like this. So depending on how you're watching, those are the comments that you're going to see during the live feed. So unfortunately, if you're watching on vertical, you're not going to see the comments that come in through horizontal, and then vice versa. But you will see them as I share them during the stream. So hopefully this is cool. We're kind of doing a little bit of technical educating, but really the whole goal here is to put the platform and get it a little bit more, get it out there a little bit more, giving more people more options and ways to tune in. Another interesting thing I'm also seeing, even though we're on LinkedIn, haven't seen any comments necessarily come in through LinkedIn, even though that could be a technical issue, but I don't want to go too deep on that. All right, so Mike, anyway, that's the reason why you're not seeing all of the comments come in live. But let's keep this going. The mustard issue has become kind of like a subtopic for tonight's show. We've got Society Brother Real Meat Stick says, if I'm using a mustard binder on beef, then I want something that has a little bit of spice, maybe even horseradish. Okay, so that comment also implies that the binder that you're saying that you do get some flavor. Are you saying that you're able to detect the taste, the difference when you cook with spicy mustard with your beef that you're able to detect that flavor in the end. So in other words, have you done a cook using beef with where you use spicy mustard on one and then maybe just regular mustard on the other? And if so, that you would be able to detect a difference in the flavor. Because I'm of the mindset, and I don't know, maybe it's different for beef, but at least like with pork, I'm of the mindset that any mustard is going to be the same. And I don't care if it's just store-bought mustard or, I mean, not store-bought, but a generic store brand mustard, Heinz mustard, or let's say even on pork, a spicy mustard. I don't think you're going to be able to tell the difference, but I could be wrong. So that's why I am asking, because again, let me put that comment back up. Real Meat Stick, he says specifically when he uses mustard on beef, he wants something that has a little bit of spice, maybe even horseradish. So I'm just curious if you're able to taste it. Then he says, if I'm using a mustard binder on a pork shoulder, then I look for something that might have some more sweetness in it. Okay, so you are implying with pork that the binder makes a difference, that you're able to taste, you're able to get some flavor out of the binder that you used at the very beginning of the cook. This is very interesting to me. So love to hear, your answers on whether you can really taste the difference. Jeff says, I think briquettes have a smell when they first light up. Absolutely. I think that's when it's the strongest. He says, a good way to tell if they are ready to put the meat on, when it is up to ready temp, the smell is less noticeable. I agree with that. And I also think that the smoke that you visibly see should also be less noticeable, less heavy, less dark as well. I think those are also some cues that you can go by. Mama Micah says, Kingsford smells very strong, but Cowboy or B&B smells like firewood to me. Coconut briquettes have barely any scent at all, and that's almost like a spoiler alert. Later in the show, we're going to talk about coconut briquettes and what the smell is that they are giving off, but that is a great observation. Correctional officer says, with regard to his wife's opinion, his wife says mustard is to be used as a brine, not for taste. She obviously has been listening. So I'm more in that camp. I'm in that camp. I don't know if I'd call it a brine, but I just see it as a tool to help, make your rub adhere. But I'm not quite there yet that you're gonna get taste from the mustard. I'm not in that camp. I'm waiting to hear more evidence about that from Mr. Real Meat Stick. Now he says you have to go with a match light. That way you get that full fuel flavor and smell and everything that you cook. Yeah, and we touched on this. I think when this question was raised earlier by correctional officer about can you smell briquettes, and I definitely think match light, because it does have the lighter fluid somehow infused into the briquettes, or like I said, I don't really know what their process is, but I know that that's part of their marketing, is that with the match light briquettes, that they should be easier to light, because they also are incorporating lighter fluid, and that will definitely give you a strong scent. Okay. All right. Correctional officer says that Jeff is the society tech specialist. I'm waiting for his input. All right, so we're going to keep this going. I know we got a few more comments. I'm going to get to those in a bit, but I want to keep the train moving. Let's move on, and now let's talk about the first of the four category of charcoal that we're going to break down tonight. So we're going to start with standard briquettes. Okay, so these are basically typically what you would find like Kingsford, for example. So the elephant in the room, and maybe what you've heard, people who kind of look at barbecue sideways or, are skeptics, they will say things like, briquettes have toxic chemicals in them. Aren't you concerned? Or, if you're always barbecuing with those briquettes, aren't you worried, that the briquettes and the toxicity is going to result in some health issues? So let's talk about Kingsford as an example, since they are still, as far as I know, probably the top seller in terms of standard briquettes, and they're definitely the one that is, I'd say, the most widely available. Like you can go to your local supermarket, and they've probably got some Kingsford blue bag briquettes available for purchase. So, and I'm going to try not to go too deep into this, but if we look at the ingredients, so you've got wood char, mineral char, which is a form of coal, starch binder, borax is used as a release agent. You've got some limestone, sodium nitrate. So according to folks who have taken a lot more time and looked at this, way more than I have, but reputable names in barbecue, none of those ingredients become harmful in your food at cooking temperature. So this has been researched and substantiated by Meathead Goldwyn at AmazingRibs.com and Chris Allingham at the Virtual Weber Bullet. So these are two of the most respected barbecue science sources online. They have both documented that these ingredients and the small amount used in standard briquettes, like the Kingsfords, aren't considered harmful at cooking temperatures. Borax is non-toxic at these quantities. Limestone is essentially the same calcium carbonate as antacids and eggshells, and the starch binder is just food grade cornstarch. Now, if you wildly disagree, vehemently disagree, don't holler at me. Shoot a note over to Meathead, and I'm sure he will be more than happy to debate you on that. He's got a lot of thoughts on that. And I trust, I know Meathead has been looking at this for years. I trust, what the conclusions that Meathead has come to with regard to the charcoal and the composition of the standard briquettes and them not being at levels that would be harmful at cooking temperatures. I trust that. Now, we've talked about match light. So the match light version, and I'm speaking specifically of the Kingsford match light version, is a different animal as it contains lighter fluid, and that's where the chemical taste concerns are actually real. Okay, so the recommendation here, don't use it for low and slow cooking. If you're going to be cooking something that's on the smoker for a long amount of time, think brisket, pork butt, those types of things, my thought is try and stay away from the match light. Again, we've talked about that's where you're getting that very distinct, very detectable, noticeable smell. It's going to be more prominent with the match light version than just about anything else. So I think if you are going to use match light, me personally, I'm telling you, don't cook with lighter fluid, period. So I would also recommend, pick a different charcoal than the match light version. But if that's all that's available to you, if you've already got some, use that, for your hot and fast cooks, things, grilling, things that you can get done relatively quickly, hot dogs, hamburgers, that type of thing. But for your low and slow, long cooks, I recommend that you do not use match light briquettes for those types of cooks. And again, if you are in vehement disagreement, feel free, put them in the comments and we can talk about it. But I doubt you're going to be able to move me off of that position. Now, where standard briquettes shine, they give you a very predictable burn because they have a consistent size. Each one should be the same shape, same shot, same size. And another thing that they're great at is they are going to give you a very long burn time. So you can find deep Memorial Day discounts on these standard briquettes. Kingsford, Royal Oak, big box stores, I'm sure you'll be able to have no problem finding good sales on those brands for Memorial Day. But let's also talk about where standard briquettes fall short. So these briquettes are going to give you more ash, or the most ash of any of the categories that we're going to talk about tonight. The peak heat is going to be lower. They also tend to be slower to light, and they provide less wood forward flavor, mainly because they don't have, they're not, the content, is not going to have as much wood in them as well. So if you're really counting on, getting a good smoke flavor strictly from your briquettes, they're not going to be able to do that. They can't replicate, and this is why we would recommend, if you're going to be cooking with these standard briquettes, supplement that. You get your wood flavor by using wood chunks. And of course, you've got all different types of variety of wood chunks that you can buy at the store, like apple, cherry, pecan, hickory, oak, mesquite, all of these different wood chunk flavors available. That's where you're going to get the wood smoke flavor from, not from the standard briquette. So ultimately, standard briquette. So what I want to leave you with here is that it's not bad fuel. I use standard briquettes sometimes too. They're just not optimized for every use case. They are not the only option. So again, that's the caution that I say when you do and you see that sale and you think, ooh, I should get 10 bags. Just use caution and know that these standard briquettes are not going to be the ideal briquettes to use for every potential situation. So that I'm going to leave you with that. Okay, let's get back into the comments here. Let's see, where do we go? Where's the next comment? Okay, Kettlemania says, I can definitely tell from the smell when people cook with charcoal as I cycle around the neighborhood. It has a different smell to me as opposed to just meat on a gas grill. Well, first, I'm impressed that when you cycle around the neighborhood that people are barbecuing and you're actually smelling the charcoal. I know in my neighborhood, I feel like I'm the only guy. I'm the only guy that I can tell is barbecuing. A few neighbors have come by, and they've commented, on what they smell for me, and then they'll mention, oh, I've got a Traeger, or I've got this or that. And I do morning walks. Maybe it's too early. I never can tell that anyone in my neighborhood is doing any kind of barbecuing. So I'm impressed. You're in a neighborhood with some backyard pit masters. That's cool. Okay, correctional officer says, I'm going to experiment with cooking some flaming hot ribs. Ooh, even the way you describe it, flaming hot ribs. I'm going to have a binder mixed with the hottest peppers and hot sauce I can obtain. Okay, so when you say hot, flaming hot ribs, you're talking about some spicy hot ribs. All right. Have you done that? Have you done that before? Just curious. Um, and if you have, how'd that turn out? And do you recommend, like, what type of peppers are we talking about? Are we talking, like uh, what do you call it? Jalapenos. What do you mean by the hottest peppers and hot sauce you can find? So give me some specifics. What are the hottest peppers and hot sauce that you're thinking of? I'm just curious for the folks that are into that level of heat. Now, Kettlemania says, I like the way B&B competition oak briquettes smell. And I'll say that lately, as far as like the standard briquettes category, and I don't know, maybe these shouldn't be considered standard briquettes because of the oak. Um, I'm thinking that you like the way that they smell because they're comprised of oak, so you're getting a true wood smell. So that's my initial thought on that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the B&B competition oak briquettes as well. Okay, the correctional officer says he got checked. He got checked by his wife. She said that she meant to use that mustard as a binder, not a brine. So Mrs. Correctional Officer is like, hey, you're making me look crazy out here. Get it right. If you're going to be, attributing a quote, a comment to me, get it right. All right. So she's right. Use the mustard as a binder, not as a brine. And Kettlemania says, with regard to those B&B briquettes, it's definitely a woodsy aroma. Matchlight has that infamous lighter fluid smell we all grew up with. Absolutely. That is, when I think about as a kid growing up, my dad barbecuing, that's the chief smell that I can remember, that I can think of. I don't really remember the scent of any meat that he put on the grill. What I remember most is that distinct lighter fluid smell, and I think that's what we're getting from Matchlight. And I'm confident. I don't have proof. I wish I had video proof, but I'm so confident that my dad was probably using far too much of that lighter fluid than he needed, because it was powerful. I feel like the goal back then was to get a good super hot raging fire going on, and I think that's what he was trying to do. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Real Meat Stick says the last seasoning or spice that you add to your protein is the first thing you will taste. So if you do your heavy salt last, if you salt it, with a lot of, I'm trying to like paraphrase. So when you're doing your seasoning, if he's saying that if the last thing you put on is a heavy dose of salt, your food will impart more of that salty taste. Same with pepper and cumin. I think that's a good point. And I don't know about you guys, but usually if I am using like salt, pepper, garlic, or even if I'm just doing salt and pepper ribs, for example, which is something I've taken to of late, both for my pork ribs and my beef ribs, I always start with salt first. And my thinking here is if I put the salt on first, the salt is going to pull out some of that moisture. So I'm kind of using it as, an agent, the dry brining effect. But I always start with the salt and then follow it up with the pepper. So it never occurred to me to do the pepper first and then follow it up with salt. And I think I think this makes a lot of sense. The last seasoning or spice you add to your protein is the first thing you will taste, and also because it's going to be sitting closer to the top, right? So that makes a lot of sense. Now, the Smiling family says, I think every kind of charcoal has a smell. That's an interesting comment. And I think as we get more into these other categories of charcoal, we'll see. We'll see if that really holds true for every single category that's available. But that's where the Smiling family is right now. He thinks that every kind of charcoal has a smell. Okay, and then with regard to B&B, and I know that B&B, I believe, is under new ownership. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they were recently purchased. And one of the things that we have seen on the bags of the charcoal, their charcoal briquettes, is we have seen a little bit of a change, and one of those new observations is what Mama Micah is referring to. She says, "Do you like the new flag bag B&B? I've only tried the original orange bag, but you can't get that anymore." So I'm gonna weigh in here because, like I said, I've been using a lot of B&B's um, oak briquettes. Now I'll have to take another look. So I've been getting my B&B, interesting enough. Walmart, you can get online. You can order that B&B bags for a good while now. They've been like $9.99 a bag, and I think it's like 17.9 pounds. I also at first I was against this, but Walmart in their competition with Amazon, they have something called Walmart Plus, which I think is their answer to Amazon Prime, at least in terms of giving you quick shipping. And I have to say, as a barbecue guy, the Walmart Plus has actually been very beneficial to me. There have been some situations where I've needed to get some stuff barbecue related for my commercial cooking. I've needed to get it really fast. And when I do the Walmart orders, I'm often able to get same day delivery. They'll put what I order on a truck and bring it out within maybe 2, 3, 4 hours from when I place the order. And I've been ordering the B&B charcoal. I like to get maybe 4 or 5 bags. Like I said, $9.99 a bag. They just leave it on my front porch, so that's even less manual labor for me. I leave them a little tip as well. But my point here is I'm not sure. I think that what they've been delivering to me of late is the flag bag version. As Mama Micah says, you can't get the original orange bag anymore. And I think that's what I've been using over the last month or so. And if I'm correct, I can't tell the difference. I haven't noticed the difference between what I think is the new version, the flag bag version, and the original orange bag version. I think they're the same. I don't think there's been a significant change in how they are making their briquettes, but I don't have proof of that. But that's just my take on it. But Kettle Mania, if you have an answer, actually, he says he hasn't tried the flag bag. But if anyone else um, has a thought, let me know. He says he's seen it, but he opted for the orange bag. The flag bag, he's saying, is a combo of hickory and oak, if memory serves correctly. Okay, that is interesting. I'm not really sure. I haven't been paying super close attention. So as I'm sitting here, I'm going to the Walmart site to see if I can pull up what they've got. Hold on. B&B charcoal. Okay, yeah, I've been getting these flag bags. Yeah, I definitely have this in my garage. Um, Hold on, let me first make sure I know where we're at. Okay, we're on segment 2, spotlight comments. Okay, let me go here. So, this is what I've been getting delivered. Hold on, let me not clicking on the right place over here. I've been getting this delivered, and yeah, they call it B&B Charcoal Competition Oak Charcoal Briquettes. It's still $9.97. I was off by 2 cents. 17.9 pounds. Oh, okay. It does say on the bag oak and hickory right there. Yeah. So I haven't, like I said, I haven't noticed anything significantly different from, the original orange bag, which I guess was strictly oak, and now it's oak and hickory. So maybe that's the biggest difference. I guess I will say I think that these briquettes burn very well. Love the price. Love how easy it is for me to get. Really hoping that they stay at this price level. I like to use these for my direct heat cooks in my smoke slinger on my pork ribs. I'm a big fan of these B&B competition charcoal briquettes. So they are indeed oak and hickory, as Kettle Mania said. All right, so hold on. Let me get back to where we were. Okay, so that's where we left off. All right. Now Kettle Mania says he's been able to get, it looks like, the original orange bag at Academy recently. So for me, I don't have academies near me, but I've heard people talk about Academy a lot. So if you have an Academy near you, that might be worth checking out. Liquor Store Dinosaur says, I use Kingsford mainly as a base to keep my offset hot enough to keep my wood easy to heat up. So yeah, when it comes to cooking with an offset, I like to use some type of a charcoal as well, kind of as the base to get my fire started. I mostly use lump charcoal because, lump is going to burn hotter than standard briquettes. So that might be something worth considering, maybe going with lump. Also, lump is going to give you less ash, but that totally makes sense as a process, to use Kingsford to get your, get stuff going, and using that as a base for your offset smoker. Mama Micah says, yes, you are correct about the oak and hickory. And here in Virginia, I can't buy the plain oak anywhere, even Academy. If I try the new ones, I'll let you know how it went. So yeah, let us know when you get a chance, Mama Micah, if you think there's a difference, because I don't think there's a difference. Now that they've gone to the oak and hickory with the flag bag, I'm not telling a difference. Real Meat Stick weighs in. He says, I have both those B&B versions. For your kettle grill and high heat, you won't be disappointed with either bag. At that point, it's a cost and availability question. Yeah, and that is always that's always going to be kind of one of the main decision points, right? Cost and availability. Absolutely. Kettle Mania says Sam's has Kingsford on sale right now. Okay, so I know Sam's, they always have like the 2 bags of Kingsford available. Are you saying that it's even cheaper than what they usually charge? And I haven't bought the 2-pack bag of Kingsford from Sam's Club in a while, so I'm not sure what the regular price is. Hold on, I'm trying to do a real-time check. Okay, I see it. Okay, so I'm not going to show it, but I do see they do have it right now. It's $19.98 for a 2-pack of 20-pound each bags of briquettes, Kingsford original briquettes. That's $3.50 off of the regular price. So, yep, you can get it at Sam's Club right now. Okay. Wow. Mama Mika says the original oak was my absolute favorite, and I'm back to cowboy since I can't find it anymore. Kettlemania, last time I bought a B&B orange bag at Academy, it was on sale equal to the Sam's sale price for Kingsford. I bought several bags. Now, Real Meat Stick says, make your own match light at home. Soak your charcoal in premium unleaded fuel for 48 hours, totally immersed. It truly will light quicker and burn hotter. That is a hot and fast cook. Wow, okay, that's an interesting comment. Have you actually done that? That sounds pretty ambitious. I almost wonder, I'm almost wondering, you're really doing it, especially as much as gas costs these days? You're soaking charcoal in premium unleaded fuel. Okay, I mean, I believe you that it will truly light quicker and burn hotter. I'm just wondering if you're doing that, because that seems a little bit extreme. But hey, if that works, okay. All right, we're going to get back to the comments. Let's move on to the next category of briquettes. So again, we've got 4 different categories of briquettes. So we started off talking about the standard briquettes, which are, the Kingsford, the B&B, the Royal Oak. Now let's talk about natural hardwood briquettes. So this is actually the category that most cooks overlook. Okay. Excuse me. All right. So it's comprised of just hardwood char and starch binder, no coal. Unlike standard briquettes, the natural briquettes don't have any coal, no borax, no limestone. Okay, and here, this is where I think the B&B actually falls into this category, which kind of makes them actually different. Brands worth knowing: B&B charcoal briquettes, like the hickory oak that we just talked about, Stubbs all natural, Weber premium briquettes, Royal Oak natural, and then Wicked Good 100% all natural. Now, why is this category underrated? You get predictable size and burn of briquettes. You get cleaner combustion, less ash, better flavor profile. But I think this is the reason why people are overlooking them. Usually, kind of like the B&B as an exception, $9.99, $9.97. But typically, your your natural hardwood briquettes usually cost 1.5 to 2 times the cost of standard briquettes, which will likely come in cheaper than most of your premium lump. The sweet spot is going to be, in terms of a use case, these are great for long, low and slow cooks where you want predictability and a cleaner burn. So I'm really curious if any of you guys are using what are considered to be the natural briquettes. I think we're kind of looking at the B&B. I think because of the oak and the hickory or the composition that is much more dependent or utilizing those wood flavors, I'm putting them in the natural category. But I'm curious if any of you guys are using maybe any of the other types of natural briquettes like the Stubbs or the Weber Premium or the Royal Oak Natural. Curious about that. The correctional officer says, I have 2 large bags of Matchlight Kingsford that were given to me last year by a cousin for a family reunion. She didn't know better. They will be used only for my fire pit to combat mosquitoes. Okay. Again, I think they're okay to use for like a real hot and fast cook, like hot dogs and burgers. But I definitely understand, where your thought process on that. Um, let's see. Okay, getting back to the peppers issue or the question I had for correctional officer. He says he has a brother, his brother and his brother and wife are both retired and living in Mexico. I'm going to try to see if I can obtain some peppers through customs. And yeah, your wife got a chuckle over, me saying that she needed to check you on getting her comment wrong. Yeah, we got to represent the wives accurately on here. Mama Micah says there's something very nostalgic about the smell of lighter fluid. Yeah, I'd never buy it myself, but when I smell it in the neighborhood, it's kind of nice. Yeah, definitely, it's a distinct smell for sure. And I think it brings back some memories. Like you said, it's nostalgic, when we smell it. And Kettlemania agrees, says he loves the smell, but he won't use it. Jeff says the smell of lighter fluid takes me back to the 70s. Yep, and dad cooking outside. That's me 100%. Growing up in the 70s and dad dousing that charcoal with fluid. Absolutely. Um, Correctional officer says, I have to laugh because my father definitely used lighter fluid. I grew up with the smell and taste. Now, Real Meat Stick says Costco now has their version of briquettes. Yeah, I think, is it Kirkland? Is that, I'm guessing they probably have it available showing there in Kirkland bags. He says, I ordered 2 bags of these online along with their pellets to trial. The costs were very competitive based on bag sizes and look. The next test is burn and taste. Yeah, definitely let us know. Let us know either on another pod or inside the society what your thoughts are about Costco's uh, their charcoal as well as their pellets. I have not yet tried either one. Uh, Kettlemania says, I guess we could all get some lighter fluid to use only for the nostalgia and not necessarily for cooking. I may do that for the pure joy. I agree with this. Trainman64 says, I feel like Walmart has stepped up their game for barbecue and meats and things. Yeah, I'm still not quite sold on Walmart for the meat. I'm probably going to go to Sam's instead. Um, but, I'm going to take your word for it. But I do think as a strategy, I do feel like Walmart has definitely stepped more into the barbecue space. And yeah, I agree. Like I said, I love using the Walmart Plus and getting some barbecue stuff delivered. I mean, I'm getting charcoal, wood chunks, different accessories. It's worth a look. If you need something in a pinch or, something cost competitively priced, don't sleep on Walmart. They're doing some things, and this is not sponsored. They're not giving me a penny. But yeah, I have to agree. I think Walmart has stepped up. Mama Micah agrees. Walmart has a huge selection of rubs and more charcoal brands to choose from now. Kettlemania likes that $9.97 per bag, as that's pretty cheap and cost effective. And yeah, we're going to talk about this. Real Meat Stick says, let's also not forget Benkotan or white charcoal. Yes, we will get to that. He says it's a premium cooking charcoal often used in Japanese grilling, very clean burning and hot, but expensive. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And he says, I loaded up my charcoal baskets last season with this for a cook. It was comparable to char logs or hog logs. Okay, that's good to know, and good to kind of think of it in the reverse. If you're not able to get the Binkotan, maybe take a look at char logs or hog logs as a good alternative if you're looking for a hot burning fuel. So these are some good points. V Solomon, thank you for weighing in. Says pure lump, but if not, I use B&B briquettes. Moved away from Kingsford. Okay. Yep. And the train man says there's an AI video on YouTube that really slams Kingsford and Royal Oak charcoal briquettes. I think I saw that same video. I feel like I saw it maybe 4 or 5 days ago. I think I saw the same video, which was interesting to me, and especially because it went so negative on Kingsford and Royal Oak. And mostly the negativity, if it was the same video, was around the composition, basically kind of like at the beginning of the show, where I talked about how you've got some people who maybe don't understand or, kind of looking at barbecue with a side eye, questioning whether or not the composition of these briquettes is going to cause you harm from a health perspective. I feel like that video that I saw was kind of stoking that similar type of fear. So I don't know. But always interesting, the fact that it's like an AI video as well. But that's a whole nother topic that I could get into. Okay, Kettlemania says, I have started leaning more towards B&B also instead of Kingsford. Okay, yeah. All right, let me move on. Let's move into the next category. I still got a couple of more categories to cover with you guys, and we are already 1 hour in. So I love, as I always say, the live comments are the engine that drives the show, the interactivity, and you guys are on it with the comments, and that's making for some great conversation. Third category. So first we talked about standard briquettes. Then we talked about the natural briquettes, natural hardwood briquettes. Now we're going to get into lump charcoal. So lump charcoal equals real wood carbonized in low oxygen kilns. So that's it. No binders, no additives. Now, the honest problem with lump charcoal, if you want to see it that way, is that there is massive variation between brands. So unlike standard briquettes where, they all have a uniform size and shape, each one, should be exactly the same as the other. That is absolutely not the case with lump charcoal. So you've got massive variation from one brand to the next. Even within the same brand, you can have massive variation between one bag or the other. And then also even within the same bag, those pieces of lump they're going to vary within the same bag. They're kind of like snowflakes. Each one is going to be a little bit different from the other. So what you hope to see is relatively consistent piece size. You want good density, hopefully what you're getting is a single hardwood species. And then you really hope that you're seeing very minimal scrap wood or oddball shapes. And then I didn't put this up here, but heaven forbid, sometimes you get in there and, you find little pieces of rocks and stones. That's the worst. But yeah, you're hoping that you're getting some some relative consistency when it comes to lump charcoal. So there's some brands, and these are just kind of what I put together in my opinion. So don't take this as fact. But right now, when it comes to lump charcoal, I kind of consider the premium tier of lump to be like Fogo Premium, Jealous Devil, and B&B Oak Lump. To me, those are like top shelf. Mid tier, going to be more like things like Rockwood, Kamado Joe, Big Block, Royal Oak Lump, Cowboy Lump. And then the rest kind of variable are your generic store brands. Now, where lump really shines, great for high heat sears, Kamado cooking, anywhere you want clean wood forward flavor and fast lighting, lump charcoal can fit the bill. Now, on the other hand, where lump struggles, it's for long, predictable, low and slow cooks, because of that variation, your how much distance you're going to get out of that lump that you start with can vary, very much vary. So it gives you a faster burn rate. So if you're doing like a 14-hour brisket cook, it can make managing the fire a little bit more challenging. Now, as we approach Memorial Day, if you're looking for those same great sales that you will probably see with standard briquettes, don't hold your breath. Lump rarely sees the same deep discounts that standard briquettes get. So yeah, don't hold your breath waiting on that. V. Solomon says, great information to know. Thank you for providing it. Thank you so much. Here's a good question. Kettlemania asks, did Stubbs become Cowboy brand? So I don't know. Does anyone know in the comments? I don't know the answer to that question. The Train Man says, has anyone tried the Jealous Devil charcoal? I think that if I recall, Jealous Devil has what they brand as like an extra large briquette, if I'm recalling correctly. And I try, in my video where I looked at different charcoals, I did look at Jealous Devil. So it's a video. If you look at the show notes for this, you should see a link to that video. And I did include Jealous Devil in my test. And I recall, if I remember correctly, I wasn't terribly impressed with Jealous Devil. And I think it was mostly the cost, the cost compared to the performance that I was getting compared to the other brands. I didn't think that it was worth necessarily the cost. Nothing wrong with it. Actually, nothing wrong with any of those briquettes that I tried in that video. I really thought that a lot of it came down to cost. And then there were some other factors that I looked at, but I wasn't overly impressed. And as I researched and put this show together, I included Fogo in that video. And Fogo had it had just come out. Their coconut briquettes. And what I didn't connect with was the fact that Fogo uses that's made from coconut shells. And so really, as I look back on it, the Fogo shouldn't have been included in that video comparison. And I know that I graded Fogo harshly for the performance because it performed a lot different than the other standard briquettes. And it was really expensive, especially when it first hit the market. It was really expensive. So I dinged the Fogo for that reason. And now that I know better, I'm realizing that Fogo shouldn't have been part of that test. But anyway, take a look at that video if you need some reference points or information about the Jealous Devil. And then of course, if any of you guys are in the comments and you have experience with Jealous Devil, feel free to jump in. For instance, Mama Micah says, I like Jealous Devil a lot. It burns very hot. The briquettes are pretty brittle, though, and can't be used again as easily. Okay, now that's an interesting point. Are you guys reusing your leftover standard briquettes? So I'm more in the camp, if I'm gonna look for a fuel that I can reuse, I'm more comfortable using my lump charcoal. I know some folks do like to reuse their leftover standard briquettes. I just don't think they burn as well second time around, regardless of the brand. So that's not something that I like to fool around with. That's just a preference thing, and absolutely nothing wrong with reusing. I'm just curious if there are others of you who are watching when it comes to standard briquettes. At the end of the cook, you've set everything down, you've got some leftover standard briquettes. Are you reusing them? So that is my question after looking at Mama Micah's comment. Real Meat Stick says, I'm a pure lump guy too. I like the way it lights in my chimney, the way it smells, and the flavor it imparts in food. I am mostly lump. I'm going to be using lump most of the time, although I have to say, since I got my smoke slinger and been doing these direct heat ribs, and mostly because I saw Frank Cox in his video using the B&B oak and hickory briquettes. So now I feel like I finally have a strong use case for using briquettes that works. But otherwise, I'm mostly cooking with lump most of the time. So I think right now I'm probably 60-40, maybe 65-35, more on the lump side. But I think the point I'm trying to get across is really that there are different use cases available for you to consider when deciding what category of fuel to use. So there's just a lot of choices available, a lot of things that you can consider. Okay. Correctional officer says, some of those briquettes read like their ashes might be useful for some lawn fertilizer or compost. Now, I have heard this too, and I don't know if this is fact or fiction, but I have seen others say the same thing, that after using briquettes, you can use the ash as fertilizer or compost. So I always put it out to you guys who are watching, because there's a wealth of information, knowledge, experience out here in the comments. So please let me know if you have found that to be a true use case for the ashes, using them as lawn fertilizer or compost. Kettlemania says he hasn't tried Jealous Devil or Fogo yet. But you might find a use case. You might find a use case, especially when we start talking about the coconut briquettes when we get to that. Okay. Now see, I kind of thought that you were kidding. But sometimes it's hard to tell, when it's coming across in just text, whether or not there's some sarcasm going on. And I was starting to think, okay, Real Meat Stick is pulling my leg here when he's talking about using. I think he's really driving home the point about, staying away from the lighter fluid and, chasing after that old nostalgic scent that we got from back in the day. Okay, I thought so, just couldn't tell, because usually, you're bringing so much science and fact. I was like, oh, now, really? Are you really using gasoline, especially at these prices? But okay, thank you for solidifying, because I have to be honest, I almost thought, has Real Meat Stick been hacked? Is this really Real Meat Stick putting up some of these comments, or is this, is this legit? I was really starting to wonder, but he confirms, no. I was joking about using gasoline-infused charcoal to cook on. Do not eat anything that is cooked over gasoline or petroleum. It will get everyone sick. That was a joke. All right, thank you so much for clearing that up. Because yeah, I was like, too late, Real Meat Stick. I already got a bag of charcoal soaking in the gas that I siphoned from my car. Okay, you guys are always a little bit quicker on the uptake than I am. Correctional officer says, I always thought about using lighter fluid with those loud Cox model airplanes of the 70s. All right, you guys are funny. Let's see. Okay. Michael, thank you for weighing in. Appreciate you. We're here. Usually here on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, but tonight moved it up a day, and I'm thankful for everyone who found us a day earlier than we usually are. But if you're enjoying this, make sure you hit like and look for us in the future. But thanks for weighing in. He says, I use B&B oak and hickory from Walmart. Yep, always in stock. $5 less per bag than Ace. And that is exactly where I am with the B&B as well. I love, and I've talked about it earlier, I like to order it from walmart.com and I get it delivered. Same day delivery. JB555, thank you for tuning in and commenting. He says B&B briquettes are far superior to Kingsford Blue Bag in regard to quality. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I think B&B briquettes are what we should be considering a natural hardwood briquette, which is a different category than Kingsford standard briquettes. So earlier in the show, we talked about some of those ingredients that are used in standard briquettes. Very different from what is used with natural briquettes. Natural briquettes are not going to include the binder, no borax, no limestone. And even on the bag, the B&B is promoting the fact that it contains oak and hickory. So it is more of a natural wood-based charcoal than Kingsford. And I think that's why you're seeing a very distinct difference in quality between the two. Okay. Tuna Fish says he likes to use Jealous Devil chunks. Those are great. I do like the Jealous Devil chunks. I like how they're like blocks. They're shaped like blocks. I think that's pretty cool and helps them to stand out. Okay, we're gonna move to the fourth category. Okay, so again, if you missed earlier at the top of the show, we indicated there are actually 4 different categories of charcoal. Most people just think of briquettes and lump. But you've actually got your standard briquettes, which is what you usually see or think of when you're talking about like the Kingsford Blue Bag or the standard Royal Oak. Then you've also got your natural briquettes, which is actually like the B&B. The B&B, the flag bag, I think those are what should be considered natural briquettes, very different from standard. And then you've got lump charcoal, which we just talked about. Now we're going to talk about kind of like an emerging category or another category that, we should also consider coconut shell briquettes and other natural alternatives. So starting with coconut shell briquettes. And these are some things that, a lot of folks just haven't considered or thought about. But they are made of compressed coconut shell carbon. And the fixed carbon in coconut shell briquettes is often 80% or more. And just for comparison, standard briquettes are around 60% or more. You might be asking yourself, what does that mean? So fixed carbon is the percentage of actual burnable carbon in the fuel. It's the part that produces heat. So higher fixed carbon equals more heat per pound and a longer burn. Everything else, moisture, ash, volatile compounds, is non-fuel weight. So when coconut briquettes are 80% plus, they're comprised of fixed carbon at 80% or more versus standard briquettes at 60% or less, you're actually getting more useful fuel and less filler per bag at that 80% fixed carbon level. So in other words, you're getting more usable fuel out of briquettes made from coconut shells than standard briquettes. And what that means is the burn time for coconut shell briquettes is significantly longer than lump, as well as longer than most standard briquettes. The ash production is very low, sometimes at a third of what the standard briquettes are producing. Flavor is going to be very neutral. I think maybe it was Mama Micah or someone mentioned earlier that with coconut briquettes, not getting any smell. That's because, again, no wood. There's no wood involved here. So you're not getting any wood smoke from a coconut-based briquette. So you're not getting that same smell. So that's a feature, a desirable feature for some folks. And then for others, maybe if you're really longing for that smell, you're hearkening back to that lighter fluid smell from your dad when you were growing up, not getting any smell from these coconut briquettes could be a big drawback. So some brands to consider. The Fogo coconut. I think they're actually being more explicit, about letting us know that their Fogo briquettes are coconut. I think they even say it on the bag now. Fogo coconut briquettes. Another brand is Coco Brico. And then there's also Komodo charcoal. Komodo charcoal cocoa char. That's a mouthful. And then one that I recently came across when I was at the NBBQA conference in Nashville a few months ago. I met the owner of Nikia Coconut. It's an Atlanta-based company. I think they're importing in their coconut, but they also have a brand named after her, I believe, called Nikia Coconut. And I actually tried this. She gave me a little sample bag that I tried last weekend, and I was really impressed at how quickly it got hot. I put them in my Kamado gel. I was just trying to burn off. I hadn't used my Kamado gel in a good while, so I wanted to do like a burn off, get it really hot. Got up over, I believe it was like over 400 degrees in 20 minutes. By 45 minutes in, it was well over 500, approaching 550, getting in that range. And when I looked at the smoke, which is another visual cue, it was almost invisible, almost couldn't be detected. So that was really impressive to me. I think I posted a little short clip inside of the society, and that kind of got us talking about this category as well. So again, these are some brands that you may want to consider, because I know some folks have said they have never tried. I think someone just mentioned that they've never tried Fogo. Again, the Fogo briquettes are going to be in a different category and might be something to consider. Reasons why: where coconut dominates is Kamado low and slow on a single load. So think 12-hour cooks. Like I said, she gave me of that Nikia coconut, gave me a small bag. I didn't test how long it lasted, but it was long lasting. I do know that. It was burning very hot. After several hours, it was still going very strong. So those were some characteristics that really caught my attention. Another strength of the coconut style briquettes is the neutral flavor. So again, you're not going to be getting your flavor from the briquettes. This again is where you're going to be adding your wood chunks in order to get the smoke flavor. And again, ashes a little bit less coming from coconut shell briquette. So if ash management is a factor for you, this would be another reason why you may want to consider giving coconut briquettes a try. Now, where it doesn't fit, if you are looking for a cook where you're doing a high heat sear, this may not be the right use case for that situation. If you are looking for you want a wood flavor forward cook and you're really hoping that, the briquettes themselves are going to give you smoke flavor, as I just mentioned, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get that from coconut shell briquettes. So in this situation, coconut shell briquettes, the cost is going to be at a premium when compared to standard briquettes. Now, I think it's worth it if you do regular long cooks, or if you're also looking to do, well, actually, I should say if you're looking on the other hand to do, like, again, the high heat, you're doing burgers and steaks, the coconut shell briquettes are not the use case for that situation. Okay, other natural alternatives. So Real Meat Stick mentioned this earlier. So Benkotan is something to consider. This is Japanese white charcoal. It's a premium niche. I know I'm not going to say this right, but it's made from ubami. Don't get at me if I butchered that, but ubami oak. It's carbonized at extremely high temperatures. So Benkotan is super dense, gives you a very long burn, very high heat, almost no smoke. Okay, it's used for yakitori and high-end Japanese grilling. Typically, I think it's going to come in at around $8 to $15 plus per pound. So this probably isn't going to be your Memorial Day grab, but as Real Meat Stick mentioned, it's definitely worth knowing about this option, as there is a strong use case for it as well. Another alternative, and this was new to me until I was putting this show together, olive pit briquettes. It's a niche Mediterranean product. So these are made from compressed olive pits. They give a long burn, low ash, and it's a mild fruit forward smoke. The downside, it's hard to find in the US, and you're going to have to find specialty retailers if this is something that you are interested in trying. So the pattern with alternative naturals is each is optimized for something specific. It might be a long burn, low ash, neutral flavor, extreme heat. So if you're considering, and I think this is true for whatever you're thinking about cooking, you should match the fuel to the cook. So that is, you should be thinking about, those types of options. What type of fuel is the best use case, for the cook that I am looking to do. Okay, let me get back to it again. If you are watching on YouTube, please take a moment and take the poll. So we were asking, let me get this queued up here. What's your go-to charcoal? And we had four options. So the four options were lump, standard briquettes, Kingsford style, natural hardwood briquettes, or coconut briquettes. And let me see how we're doing in terms of the results so far. Oh, okay, so this is kind of what I expected, and I'm looking at. I don't know if YouTube combines the votes coming in for those who are watching on the vertical with the horizontal. I suspect that it probably doesn't. Right now, I'm looking at the folks who are watching us kind of on the standard traditional feed. You know, you're holding your phone like this, and the picture is optimized for that use case. So over there, we have got 28 votes so far, and lump charcoal is in. Wait, hold on, let me get it in. My eyes checked. Okay, actually, lump and standard briquettes are tied. They both have 36% of the vote. Natural hardwood briquettes has 29% of the vote. And as I expected, coconut briquettes currently don't have any votes. So again, very, kind of what I expected. Lump and standard, as those are usually the two categories that folks think about. Equal number of votes for those two categories, followed by natural hardwood, and then coconut is bringing up the rear with no votes so far. So the poll is still open. Feel free to jump in, weigh in on your thoughts on that. Definitely appreciate it. Okay, let me see. Kettlemania says, I have only used lump a couple of times. I didn't care for so much size variation. I also had concerns of where the wood came from. Yeah, that very much mirrors what we talked about as some of the downsides to using lump charcoal. So definitely that makes sense. Real Meat Stick. Let me go back. Wait. Press the wrong button. Real Meat Stick says, lump charcoal is my go-to. Am I saying this right? Acacia wood, eucalyptus wood, oaks, your premium brands have consistent, dense chunks versus the pea-sized pieces of some of the standard brands. So he likes the lump charcoal. And it looks like he's kind of leaning into some of the more like specialty kind of wood species in terms of lump. Some premium brands, in other words, where you can find those species of wood giving you good quality chunks and hopefully a lot less of the variability and small little pieces that Kettlemania doesn't like. Kevin says he's been using Jealous Devil ever since I bought my offset smoker to start my fires. Yeah, that's how I start mine. Well, I start mine with lump charcoal, but he says he's using Jealous Devil. It's been terrific. I also use it sometimes for cooking chicken and other meats on my Weber kettle and Kamado Joe. Okay, and I assume that when you say you're using Jealous Devil, I'm going to assume that you're talking about using their lump. I'm assuming you're using their lump charcoal, since you mentioned that you're using it with your offset smoker, and I think that's what most people use. Let me know if I've got that incorrect. But Kevin says, not sure why my messages are showing up as Kevin from Cali. That's my old handle. It's me. I'm Montana Kev typing here. Okay. I don't know. Maybe you're on a different device that you usually use, and it pulled up your old YouTube handle. But anyway, good to see you, Montana Kev. That's a big difference, being in Montana versus being in California. But good to see you as always. Kettlemania says, maybe I should try lump again. I used Royal Oak in the past, and it had immense variability in size. Yeah, and again, I in the show notes, I've got links to my charcoal comparison video, as well as a video I made looking at different lump charcoal brands. I looked at Royal Oak. I included Royal Oak in that lump charcoal test. I recall that I wasn't impressed. Probably had a lot to do with the variability. This video I made was probably at least 3 years old, I'm thinking. So I can't really remember all the details, but I do recall Royal Oak was not amongst my favorites. So yeah, again, we've tried to lay out like the use cases of why you might want to consider using lump for certain situations. And yeah, maybe try some other brands, from lump. I do like B&B lump charcoal as well. I like Fogo. Real Meat Stick mentioned there are some premium brands. If you like, for instance, want to use eucalyptus, you might find, a specific brand that caters to a specific species of wood that you may want to try. Correctional officer says, okay, now this is a big wish. I wish Weber would place their kettles on sale. I must have a Weber kettle to add to my arsenal. So, from my own just kind of observations, Weber never goes on sale, or if they do, it's very seldom, very rare. Does Weber discount their products? Very well, seldom. Maybe you might see a discount maybe on a gas grill at the end of the season, maybe. Or maybe if they're getting ready to replace one of their pellet models with something new that's coming out. But even then, I think the sales are few and far between. I even noticed, like, I like to go to Ace Hardware, for example. Ace always has coupons available, save 10% or 25% when you spend X dollars. On the back of the coupon, there's always the disclaimer, the Weber products are not included. So they're one of those brands that does not utilize discounts to push products. Okay, Kettle Mania, getting back to that question I had, do you guys reuse your briquettes? Kettle Mania is in the yes, I reuse briquettes camp. Mama Micah says, I put the old charcoal at the bottom of my slow and sear and the fresh lit coals on top. That makes good sense. Actually, that's a great point, a great suggestion. I might have to consider that. Maybe putting because like I said, I've not been a fan of reusing my briquettes, but that makes sense. If you take the old, have it on bottom and put some fresh on top, yeah, I might try that. I like that. Matter of fact, I'm gonna give that yeah, I like that. Yeah. Kettlemania says add new to the use. So yeah, he's in the same camp. When he reuses his briquettes, he adds new to the use. So you're not just going out and reusing strictly the old briquettes. You're either adding new to the top or just in some form or fashion, you're including new briquettes with the old. That makes a lot of sense. Real Meat Stick says Royal Oak pieces are not consistent. Yeah. And you may find them to have some extra Cracker Jack box surprise items in the bag. I like how you put that. BJ's Wholesale has a 30-pound bag on sale for under $20. All right, love the sharing of information and real-time sales that are available. We already talked about how the 2-pack bag of Kingsford standard briquettes is currently on sale at Sam's Club for $3.50 off. And then I've been touting how I like to get that B&B flag bag, standard and hickory briquettes I have found it to be $9.97 for a 17.9 pound bag for at least the last few months. So those are some hot tips if you're looking to get some deals, real-time deals. Correctional officer says, Jealous Devil worked great for me. I used Jealous Devil twice last year, and it burned very clean and consistent. I didn't have any left over, but I didn't have to use a lot of it for my old Smoky. Yeah. And yeah, Royal Kettle Mania likes the way Real Meat Stick put it. The Cracker Jack surprise that you find in the bag. So I don't want to, ish too much on Royal Oak, but hey, this is real use experience. Mama Micah says Charlie Brown opened a bag of Royal Oak and said, I got a rock. Yeah. So I don't know, Royal Oak, do better. Do better. Okay, Real Meat Stick says Jealous Devil, Logo, and Brazil Explore have been my go-to brands for premium lump charcoal. This is why I love doing this podcast. Did I mention that this is my favorite hour of the week and I get to chat in real time with you guys? Because even though I'm trying to educate, give you guys information, I always come away with new ideas and ways to look at things. I have never heard of Logo or Brazil Explore. Real Meat Stick points out these are premium lump charcoal options. And I'm going to take a look. Okay, Kevin, Montana Kev says, there are additives in most briquettes, but not in lump charcoal. Okay, so he's saying there are additives in most briquettes, but not in lump charcoal. I would not recommend putting briquette ash in your compost heap or into your garden. Yeah, that was a question I had. Because I feel like it's like a folklore or, kind of like one of those. I just see it from time to time on social media, people talking about taking their ash and adding it to their garden or their compost from the standard briquettes. And that's a good point, because we talked about earlier that the standard briquettes, while not harmful for cooking, they do have some things in them that aren't what we would consider natural. And adding that to your garden, that makes sense to me, may not necessarily be a great idea. So I appreciate that, Montana Kev. Okay, correctional officer might have some real-time information. Anyone who has a smoke slinger, if you are interested in a deal, please let me know ASAP. I will allow you to use my military discount for purchasing charcoal if you allow for me to borrow your grill. Okay, we got some quid. What's that saying? Quid pro quo. I know I'm saying that wrong, but you guys know what I'm talking about. We got some, you shake my hand, I shake your hand, stuff going on in the comments. Okay, I'm not mad at it. Okay, Tuna Fish CPR says twice I have cooked 2 7.2-pound pork butts in my Kamado Joe Jr. with Jealous Devil chunks. I think these are those XL chunks at 250 to 275 for 6 to 8 hours without a reload. All right, that's good information. Good information letting us know. And we talked about this, that one of the use cases for standard briquettes is, low and slow cooking, good predictability. And here's a real use case of someone getting plenty of cook time without having to reload on a Kamado Joe Jr. with Jealous Devil chunks. Or maybe you were just talking about the chunks. Now, okay, maybe I'm misinterpreting this. Were you using, when you say Jealous Devil chunks, are you saying that you didn't, not the charcoal, but you're just talking about those block wood chunks, and that's all you used, and you were able to get 6 to 8 hours just from that? And that is definitely another way of potentially doing a cook, and I'm really interested if that's what you meant. You just literally just cooking with the wood chunks, and you were able to get 6 to 8 hours without a reload. So as I reread that hit me. Maybe that's what you're saying, and that would be really interesting to me. Okay, I'm going to move to another category, and we'll get back to these other comments because you guys are cooking in the comments. But this was kind of the thing that I wanted you to really take away from this episode, the importance of matching your fuel to your cooker or your use case. So if you're using a Kamado, and this is just, food for thought. And again, as I always say, there's no one absolute way to do anything in barbecue, and you all may have totally different use cases or different ways of doing the same thing that I'm talking about, just doing it differently, and that is all fair game. We're open to all the suggestions, all the ideas, anything that helps us barbecue better. So again, if you're using a Kamado, so I'm talking like Kamado Joe, Big Green Egg, lump is good for sears and short cooks. Coconut briquettes are good for long, low, and slow where ash management matters. We just got an example of someone potentially using just wood chunks, if I'm reading that right, for a nice long, low, and slow cook. So Kamados especially can benefit from coconut on overnight cooks because it's going to give you low ash and a long burn combination. So just some food for thought. If you haven't tried coconut, that could be a use case that makes you give it a shot. If you're cooking on a kettle, like a Weber kettle, or maybe the slow and sear kettle or some other kettles, they're versatile, right? So you can pretty much use whatever fuel you throw at it in a kettle. Standard or natural briquettes will be great if you're using the snake or the minion method. If you're doing a direct heat cook, consider using lump charcoal. If you have a drum smoker, like a pit barrel cooker or a gateway, briquettes, standard or natural shine here, because again, the briquettes are going to give you a predictable burn rate that matches the drum's airflow design. But use lump charcoal for higher heat cooking. And that's another thing I love about drums. You can go either or, and you can do very well. They're so easy to cook on. Offset smokers. Usually charcoal isn't going to be your main fuel when you're cooking with an offset, but as we talked about, it can be used as a base alongside your wood splits. I think lump works best, but absolutely no reason why you can't use standard briquettes. The one thing I'll say about using standard briquettes is that they do tend to leave more ash than you may want if you're doing a long cook. So that, to me, is kind of another reason why I'm more of an advocate for the lump charcoal. And then, of course, with pellet grills, charcoal doesn't apply, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I know Royal Oak makes a charcoal-based pellet. If you're kind of looking for the best of both worlds, a lot of people like to mix the Royal Oak charcoal-based pellets with maybe a wood-flavored pellet, and you kind of get a little bit of that charcoal thing going with some wood flavor. So just another option to think about. And I do have a video on the YouTube channel where I took a look at the Royal Oak pellets as well. Okay, Real Meat Stick here. He says, if you want to get nerdy on density, weigh a chunk on a scale, then estimate its volume by water displacement in a measuring container. Density is mass divided by volume. Oof, you're getting nerdy and way more scientific than my mind is ready to tackle at the moment. But I love the suggestion and the baseline for doing an experiment. If you want to, you can always count on Real Meat Stick to help us go a little bit deeper on all of these topics. So Kettlemania asks, is all Fogo coconut? I believe, and at least I don't have proof, but I do think, and that's what they appear to be touting, if I'm interpreting what they put on their bag, that their briquettes are made from coconut shells. So I think the answer to that question is yes. But I'm kind of curious. Let's see. Is Fogo coconut briquettes 100% coconut? I'm just curious. Let me put that in. Okay. Hold on. Let's see. Get my placeholder. Okay. Let's see what the real-time answer to that question is. So, Mr. Google, I don't know if you guys can read that. Mr. Google here says yes. Fogo coconut shell charcoal briquettes, are marketed as an all-natural product. They are crafted from 100% natural coconut shells, a byproduct of harvesting, and held together by natural plant-derived binders such as starch and vegetable oil, rather than artificial chemical binders or fillers. So that's what Google is telling us. That's what Google is telling us as far as that question. So I think until I see something otherwise, I do think that, yeah, they are essentially 100% coconut. And from what I can tell, when we talk about that coconut category, again, some of the others a little more still like specialty where you might have to go online to order them. But I do know every time I go to Home Depot, I do see Fogo coconut briquettes available. I think Ace might have them as well. So yeah, give it a shot if you're ready to try that category. Correctional officer says, I'm interested in trying bamboo charcoal. It burns really hot and is excellent for high heat. All right, that's another example of an alternative natural charcoal that might be worth a look. And then he says, with a vortex, some of these briquette types will be awesome for cooks that need high heat. Real Meat Stick, looking into Nakia Coconut out of Georgia, says they have some good reviews. Unfortunately, it is not sourceable locally outside of their regional market. Yeah, the impression that I'm getting is that they aren't shipping, and I think you have to be in the Atlanta or the Georgia area and find where they're available. But again, I used the sample bag that I got, and I was impressed. So I really hope that I'm able to obtain more in the future. Let's see. Mama Micah says their lump charcoal is hardwood, but their briquettes are only coconut. So I think Mama Micah is speaking about Fogo. And Montana Kev says, what's the difference in burn characteristics between, say, Kingsford style charcoal and natural hardwood charcoal briquettes? You know, how long they cook, how hot they cook, how much ash, etc. So I don't really have specific answers, but the research that I found indicates that I think the natural briquettes are, I believe, actually, you know what? Before I misspeak, because I was gonna say, I think they burn hotter, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Wait a minute, hold on. Let's see, hold on. Sorry, I love getting these types of questions. And I'm gonna see if I can get like a real-time answer. Okay. So I was interested in like the carbon makeup of natural charcoal compared to standard briquettes. And what I'm finding real quick is that natural charcoal is almost pure carbonized wood, while standard briquettes are a mixture of carbon fillers and binders. So what that tells me is that the natural briquettes are going to burn hotter, right? Let's see, it says burn performance. Because it is pure carbon without fillers, natural charcoal lights faster and burns hotter. Briquettes, due to their fillers, burn at lower temperatures but provide a longer, more consistent and even heat. So I think that answers part of your question, right? Let me get that back on the screen. Yeah, you asked about heat, ash, ash production. It says natural charcoal produces very little ash. Standard briquettes produce significantly more ash, which can stifle airflow and lower heat over long cooks. So yeah, this is kind of what I was thinking. Natural briquettes are going to burn hotter and produce less ash than standard. So that's what we found. Mike says, I'm a lump man. Yep, lump charcoal. Let's see. Mama Micah says, in my own use, Kingsford lights fast and burns hot, but cools down quicker and leaves a lot of ash. Cowboy and B&B light a little slower, but stay hot longer and make less ash. Yeah, I think that is right on point. That's very consistent, I think, with what we're talking about. Now, correctional officer says Cowboy has a reputation for having special prizes too. So I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe you guys have experiences with that as well. I think in my lump charcoal video, I was pretty happy with Cowboy, but I do recall people in the comments not feeling necessarily the same as what my one-time test, what I was getting. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about Cowboy and their lump. Curious to know. Montana Cab says, I noticed over the years that the bags of kinks for charcoal were for Kingsford were 20-pound bags, but then they shrunk them down to 18 pounds and now they're down to 16 pounds on Memorial Day sales. So I think it kind of depends on where you're buying it too. Like for instance, we talked about at Sam's Club, they still have the 20-pound bags. Um, Not sure about like the hardware stores, Home Depot, Lowe's. I'm not really sure if they're carrying the 20-pound or if that's evidence of where you're seeing smaller bags. I suspect though, and I think I've seen this, when you go to your supermarket, I think that's where you're really likely probably to see like the 16-pound bag of Kingsford and being sold at kind of like the same price that they used to carry the larger bag. Correctional officer, no. See, this is evidence. We've been at it now for almost 2 hours, and my eyes are playing tricks on me. That says Real Meat Stick. Real Meat Stick says, could you throw a handful of pellets, such as smoking pecan, on top of your glowing orange charcoal to add that smoky flavor? You know, I haven't done this yet, but I have read about other folks who have. I think the answer to that is yes. I think you absolutely could throw a handful of smoking pecan pellets on top of your charcoal to get some smoky flavor. I think you could absolutely do that. Um, yeah, for sure. Okay, let's move on here. Um, okay, so in terms of your Memorial Day game plan, your buying framework. Oh, well, wait a minute. We got a super chat. Thank you to Mike. Mike says, good episode as always. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the super chat. They do indeed make a big difference. I absolutely appreciate that. Okay. So in terms of Memorial Day, so your buying framework, or you know, kind of how you might want to approach Memorial Day coming up and all these sales that are going to be available. Ask yourself first, what are you going to be cooking? You know, again, if it's burgers, steaks, hot dogs, think lump, or as we talked about, maybe that's the use case, you know, for the Match Light Kingsford briquettes. I mean, I don't recommend those, but if you happen to have a bag like a correctional officer has, that might be the use case. If you're doing an overnight brisket, think natural briquettes or coconut. If you're doing a mixed cook, you know, maybe think about buying two categories. Not necessarily, I mean, I don't mean like two bags of the same thing, but maybe think about, you know, getting both some standard briquettes, some natural briquettes, get some lump. You know, if you're kind of getting yourself ready for the summer, you know, don't buy, you know, 10 bags of the, you know, the on sale Kingsford. You know, mix it up. You know, give yourself some variety, some choices. Ask yourself, what cooker are you using? So you want, again, you want to match the fuel to the airflow design of the cooker. And we just went through those different use cases depending on if you're cooking, you know, with a kettle, a drum smoker, a Kamado, an offset. You know, ask yourself those types of questions. Of course, what's actually on sale? So standard briquettes will have the deepest discount. Natural briquettes, you know, sometimes you're going to see those with a buy one, get one for free offer, or maybe it's buy one, get one for 50% off. Lump, again, is rarely discounted, and coconut almost never shows up as a big box sale. You may have to go online or, go to like a specialty store. But I will say, if I'm not mistaken, I think Home Depot might currently be selling the Fogo coconut at a little bit of a discount, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know why I feel like I read that somewhere, saw that somewhere. Um, Hold on here, if I can type and talk at the same time. I'm gonna see if I can look that up real quick. Hold on. Fogo charcoal. Okay, let's see. Interesting. When I go online here, I'm not even seeing the Fogo coconut, which is odd. I feel like I've been seeing it all the time at Home Depot, and now I put it in live on the show, and it's not coming up. Maybe that's why I saw it on sale. Maybe it was we're no longer selling it. Or, you know what it is, actually? Maybe I've been misspeaking all this time. It was Ace Hardware. I'm having memory lapses here because I actually went to one of my Ace Hardwares and I bought the last 2 bags of Fogo that they had. It was Ace Hardware. They have, yeah, there it is, sale. All these pop-ups. Wait, did I just close out? Wait, what happened? Fogo. Ace. Oh, there. Okay. I'm getting all discombobulated. Okay. Fogo, all natural coconut charcoal briquettes, 15.4 pound bag. Currently, you can save 10% at Ace Hardware. It's not Home Depot. It was Ace Hardware, and they currently have it for $17.95 a bag. So that might be worth it. If you want to give coconut shell briquettes a look, if you've never bought them before, might be worthwhile to take a look. That could be a good opportunity to check them out because again, they are rarely on sale. Okay. So again, as I mentioned, maybe give yourself like a combo. So try this for Memorial Day, maybe 1 bag of natural briquettes for low and slow predictability, 1 bag of quality lump for sears and, all purpose kind of cooking, because I think a lot of us consider ourselves lump guys. If you cook in a Kamado, or, just in general, maybe give coconut a shot, do like get a bag and do an overnight cook and see how it performs. So I guess what I want to leave you with there is, don't just load up on the Kingsford or the Royal Oak standard briquettes because they are insanely cheap. Because again, you could be boxing yourself in for the so-called barbecue season because you've got way too much of that stuff. So again, we talked about the 4 different categories of charcoal. It's not just briquettes and lump. We've got standard briquettes like your Kingsford, your Royal Oak. You've got natural briquettes like the B&B, Oak and Hickory. You've got lump charcoal. When I think of lump charcoal, I think of, Fogo, Jealous Devil, B&B. And then you've got another category that maybe we should be thinking about more, coconut shell briquettes, like the Fogo brand we just showed in real time, currently on sale at Ace Hardware. Other alternatives, Real Meat Stick says, hey, take a look at the Binkotan. Um, uh, uh, Correctional officer says he's looking for bamboo charcoal. So other alternatives worth considering. Again, if there are some types of brands or things like that that you haven't checked out before or aren't familiar with, again, if you look in the show notes, I've got links to two of my videos. One of them is who makes the best barbecue charcoal. The other is who makes the best lump charcoal. Okay. And again, as we got really deep into the coconut briquettes, that conversation started completely inside of the Backyard SmokeMaster Society. So, you know, check us out. If you're not already part of the society, information about that is also in the show notes. It'll take you 20 seconds to get in. As we talk about all the time, we keep the conversation going, just like it is here on the podcast. All week long, different barbecue topics are discussed inside of the society. And also, if you haven't already, I don't know why you wouldn't, if you got value from this episode, I hope that you subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends who are also deep into barbecue. Of course, drop your comments. Let us know what you are going to be cooking this barbecue, this Memorial Day weekend that's coming up. So always appreciate you folks. Let's see. Our next live show will be on Wednesday, May 20th. So we'll be back on the Wednesday schedule. So a week from tomorrow, we will be back Wednesday, May 20th, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Sorry, hit that prematurely. Didn't say goodbye properly. Thanks again, you guys, for tuning in to the Backyard SmokeMaster BBQ Podcast. I'm your host, Kenyatta Robinson. I always appreciate all the live support. Again, your comments definitely is the reason why we went over 2 hours, because we all love barbecue. We really get into it, and your comments are the engine that drives the show. Thanks again. I will see you soon. Get out there, enjoy and grill something or smoke something on your grill or your smoker, and I will see you soon.